Hey everybody, Michael Thurman back here with another episode of Can't Stop Snapping. You may notice that my voice sounds a little different. I do have a new microphone set up. Thank you again for all the feedback. Before I wasn't really using a great microphone. I now have a professional grade microphone to record these episodes with. So this intro is recorded with the new episode, though the interviews that take place in the episodes coming out this week will still be from my previous setup. So I will sound a little different once we get into the here. But in the episodes starting next week, they will all be recorded with this new microphone. So it should have some better sound quality for all of you listeners. Before we get started today and jump into the 5-cost card breakdown, I just wanted to highlight something that's going on in the official Marvel Snap Discord. This was announced earlier today, June 13th. The Discord event going called Atlantis Beach Club. So that of the event currently going on in the game, but essentially in the Discord, there's kind of some theory crafting around what is the best deck to go with a new card wave. We highlighted wave in one of our last episodes last week, but there's kind of a little competition. You can theory craft and kind of share what you think is the ideal deck to play wave in and talk about the strategy you would play with, whether you have her as a card or not, or whether you even have all the cards you theory craft with. You can use marvelsnap.io to create a deck, and then you can upload that into the Discord. And there will be a reward for the winner, kind of a special role, a little trophy next to your name in the Discord. So just wanted to highlight that. I think it's a fun thing to participate in. So if you're interested in doing that, make sure to join the official Marvel Snap Discord. And then as always, just want to shout out about the Twitter, our Twitter for the podcast at can't_stop_snap. If you have any content creators out there that you'd love to hear on the show, whether big or small, medium, doesn't matter to me, please let me know there on the Twitter. I'm looking for more people for future episodes. We've got a couple other people in the pipeline, but if there's somebody you're dying to hear and you'd love to hear participate on the podcast about a variety of different topics, please let me know, and I'd love to coordinate to get them on the show. Without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Hey listeners, we are back with another episode of Can't Stop Snapping. We are continuing our series of breaking down all the cards that are currently available in the beta build of Marvel Snap. Today's episode, we will be breaking down the 5-cost cards, and I am once again joined by a wonderful co-host, a content creator. This is Jeff Hoogland. He's been streaming the game since the beta launched, and I'm very grateful to have him on the show. Jeff, thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for having me, Michael. Excited to be here.
Yeah, no, it's great. I've been catching some of your streams, and I've caught some of your YouTube content as you've broken down some things about the economy in the game and some of your thoughts and opinions. So, great to have you here. And before we launch into the card breakdown, I would just love to give you a minute just to kind of share with the listeners your overall impressions of the games, maybe some pros and cons, just where your feeling is at right now, and what are you hoping for the future?
I think the core game system that Marvel Snap has implemented is really fantastic. It's fast and punchy in a way I think no other card game has really succeeded in being before, while still having a good bit of strategic depth. And as someone who's an adult with a busy schedule and many small children, the fact that the games have kind of this upper time limit on how long they could be, I think is something that's super appealing to both myself and a lot of other adult gamers.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I would love to just give you a second. I know that you've already put out some of your own content talking about the economy of the game. Maybe just a high level kind of your concerns about the game economy, and obviously we'll tell people to go check out your videos. But kind of what are your thoughts there right now?
I think the current card acquisition model leaves a little bit to be desired. I think one of the big draws that a lot of card game players have to these types of games is being able to kind of experiment and brew and build decks and work on their own ideas. And the current card acquisition just kind of hinders that, and that there's no way to work towards specific cards. Like, we're going to talk about a lot of really sweet designs tonight, but if that card that you want to play with isn't in a specific card pool that you're currently pulling cards from, there's no way in your power currently to say, oh, I'm going to work towards getting card X that I really want to brew with.
Yeah, no, 100%. And obviously I've seen lots of other people in the community give that feedback to Second Dinner, and we will see obviously how that plays out in the future. But let's jump in here. So, as listeners remember, we've been kind of following this same format. I will read out the cards. We will review the cost, the power level of each card, and the ability. And we'll just kind of have some conversation around our thoughts, our opinions, what cards we think maybe are better than others, etc. And we will go through the 5-cost cards tonight. So starting off right here, we've had one for each cost level. There is always one card that doesn't have an ability, and we start off with it today. Abomination is a 5-cost, 8-power card, and he has no ability. So I guess with this one, not a ton to talk here, Jeff, but I know there are some cards and locations that buff, cards with no abilities. Do you think there's enough there for any kind of archetype right now, or not so much?
Unless there's some kind of like payoff that you can play inside of your actual deck that says, okay, cards with no abilities get this bonus. Outside of when that one location is like the hot zone, I think these kind of vanilla cards just aren't going to be playable, generically speaking.
Yeah, no, 100%. Abomination, everybody starts out with him when they start out the demo of the game. So obviously people play with them basically until they can replace him. So continuing on here, next up we have Arrow. Arrow is a 5-cost, 6-power card, and her ability reads, on reveal, move all enemy cards played this turn to this location. Is this a card you've unlocked or played with yet?
I actually had this get randomly generated in a game that I was playing earlier today, and it's a neat design, but it really depends on being able to predict like what your opponent is going to be able to do. And one of the things that it feels like this card will kind of struggle with is it can pull like their big play to a location, but you're basically just kind of one-for-oneing your big play for their big play because this card costs so many resources.
Yeah, and it doesn't have that high of a power level, right? We'll see some other cards that do have a higher power level. So, yeah, it really kind of depends on you knowing what your opponent's going for and if you can really interrupt their strategy. So, hey everybody, I wanted to jump in here for just a second to tell you about Anchor. Anchor is a tool that I am using to create this podcast and distribute it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and various other podcasting platforms. Anchor is an app you can download for free on the App Store and use to record, edit, add sound effects, etc., and distribute your podcast. I chose to use it because it was very simple to get up and going quickly, and it was free to use. If you have a podcast idea that you've been, throwing around in your mind and you'd like to get out there, make sure to download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and create your podcast today. Up next, we have Black Bolt. Black Bolt is a 5-cost, 7-power card. His ability reads, on reveal, your opponent must discard the lowest cost card in their hand. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this one. We've got a couple cards that we've seen in the lower tiers that, make your opponent discard or discard from their deck, etc. This one's the lowest cost card, which obviously with Black Bolt being a 5-cost, can't really play him till late in the game. Now, some people obviously save some pretty good cards to the end that may be lower cost, but obviously this isn't going to get rid of anybody's 6 draw, right? So I don't know. What do you think about strategy with Black Bolt?
So the thing that's neat about this card that jumps out in my mind is if you've been playing or watching the beta, you know that the kind of Nova combo deck is kind of prevalent everywhere. And it's the best deck in that first pool of cards. And this jumps out at me as something that could potentially offer counterplay to that because the better Nova players have kind of taken to, okay, they're waiting to pull the trigger on that until turns, 6 a lot of the time. And this could be a card that could punish them for doing so.
Yeah, kind of throw off what they've been building up to the whole game. Yeah, I could definitely see that. That's a great point.
The other thing is its actual rate just like isn't that bad, right? Like the Abomination was the vanilla 5 for 8 power. This is 5 for 7. So even just based on that metric, it seems close to reasonable.
Yeah, definitely higher than several of these cards. So. Up next, we have Captain Marvel. She is a 5-cost, 6-power card, and her ability reads, after the final turn, move to a location that wins you the game if possible. I find this one fascinating, right? It seems very interesting. I haven't seen a ton of people unlock Captain Marvel. She's in one of the later pools of cards, so we're just not quite there to seeing her in a ton of play yet. But I just find this interesting of like, how will this actually affect the turn of games at the end of a round?
Yeah, I mean, the end game, end turns of Snap have so many permutations of what you have to go through to figure out, well, if they play this here and I do this here, the back and forth. And this card just adds a whole other layer to it, where instead of playing against 2 of their spots, you're basically playing against all 3 of them with the way this card can move itself around.
Yeah, because you could leave open an extra spot at each kind of spot on the board to let Captain Marvel do her thing at the end. And yeah, the opponent really has to go for all 3 essentially, right? It's wow. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that plays out later on. Up next, we have Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus is, again, a 5-cost card with 10 power, highest one we've seen so far. His ability reads, on reveal, pull 4 random cards from your opponent's hand to their side of this location.
I mean, this card
ahead.
jumps out at me again as I talked to a couple people that played the Friends and Family beta before this kind of closed beta that we're in now, and they said the Nova deck wasn't omnipresent there. And this jumps out to me as another card like, oh, this could disrupt those big late turns that they have, right? Like you pull a bunch of random things out of their hand and kind of gunk them up and get them stuck on the right side or a specific spot on the board.
Yeah, can really throw off any kind of deck that is playing multiple 2, 3, 1-cost cards, etc. kind of on the last couple of turns, right?
Yep.
Can really kind of throw off any cards they've been holding on to during the game. So yeah, definitely a counter. I think that one of the things we've talked about this basically in every episode we've had thus far is this Nova Carnage combo, right? And I think it's so prevalent because we really haven't got some of the best counter cards yet. So
yep.
Up next, we have Gamora. Gamora is something you unlock relatively early with kind of the intro season pass. Gamora is a 5-cost, 6-power card, and her ability reads, on reveal, if your opponent played a card here this turn, plus 4 power. So, as the listeners know, we bring this up every episode. All the Guardians of the Galaxy cards essentially have a similar ability, just with different costs, different power, different buffs. What's your opinion on this, Jeff? I mean, a lot of people have been saying, Guardians of the Galaxy are okay, but I'd much rather play a Rocket or a Star-Lord for the lower cost. What do you think? Is Gamora good, bad, middling?
I actually really don't like this cycle at all. I think, well, obviously there's some neat head games where if you predict, they can like create that good dopamine, like, I got him, I was right. But you look at just kind of the rate that you're getting, even when this card pays off, like you're going up to 10 power. And it feels like there's other cards in this 5-cost slot that can provide a similar rate, but provide it more consistently or more specifically within your control if you meet certain conditions.
Yeah, 100%. We will talk about one that I agree. I think is much more consistent here in just in a couple of cards. But
yep.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a middling effect, especially at that high cost. So up next we have Hobgoblin. Hobgoblin is a fun card. Hobgoblin is a 5-cost, -8 power. So we've seen a couple minus powers in previous tiers. Definitely the highest. Hobgoblin's ability is on reveal, your opponent gains control of this. Is this one you've seen unlocked, or have you played with this yet?
Yeah, I've had this one randomly generated a couple of times. And after getting to play with it, it's one of the cards I'm most looking forward to unlocking. I think this design is really sweet. And one of the things that happens a lot in games of Snap is, you'll hold up a space with only 2 or 3 cards in it because you don't want to let your opponent know what your total power is going to be there for as long as possible. And this card really punishes doing that.
Yeah, 100%. I love, one of the things I like best about the game design is just, like you say, it's so simple, but there's just so much you can do to kind of mess with the board, essentially, your side and the opponent's side, whether that's bluffing, whether that's really, throwing off their side with rocks, with Hobgoblin. There's so much you can do to kind of have to create on-the-fly adjustments for your opponent, which is awesome.
Yep.
Up next is the card I was referencing a second ago. Iron Man, another card you unlock kind of at the beginning of the game. Iron Man is a 5-cost, 0-power card, and his ability reads, ongoing, your total power is doubled at this location. When I've seen this played, and everybody's obviously played it because you kind of start the game with it. Very consistently, you can get 10 or higher, right? Just depending on what cards you play. So Iron Man can be very consistent, and then if you play something that buffs cards like Ironheart, etc., that gets doubled with Iron Man if any of your cards get buffed. So I think Iron Man's a pretty solid card, but I'm not sure if you would agree, disagree, if you think it'll be kind of long lasting, a place in the meta, or just kind of temporary here at the beginning.
No, I think it definitely seems like a very reasonable card. You hit the nail on the head where this card, usually it's adding a minimum of 10 power in spots where it ends up at, but it can even be much larger than that if you're comboing it with other things, or God forbid the double ongoing effects location flips up.
Oh yeah, yeah, and then you're doubling. So yeah, no, I think Iron Man will continue to see play, and it is a great card for now. Up next, we have Jessica Jones. She is a 5-cost, 8-power card, and her ability reads, on reveal, if you don't play a card here next turn, +2 power.
So this was actually
so
the card that I was thinking about when we mentioned Gamora and having more control over getting 10 power for 5. And she creates kind of this neat little head game where your opponents go, oh, they're only going to be +2 power in this spot. I can get them. And then you could even double down after and like, okay, I'm going to negate her ability, but I'm going to drop a 6-drop here or something that's more than +2 and beat them because they thought we were only going to be +2 in this spot.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely, it's in your control. The other one, Gamora, same power. If she gets her buff, but it's a guessing game, right? Here it is. You have control whether you want the 2 power or not, but you're also just getting the higher base power. So overall, a much more solid card than Gamora, I would say.
Yep.
Okay, up next we have Claw. Claw is a 5-cost, 4-power card, and his ability is ongoing, +5 power at the location to the right. Yeah, I think this is an interesting design. There's a couple of cards that obviously kind of can buff different locations based on where you're placed. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything super special about Claw. I mean, obviously you're kind of getting 9 power spread across 2 locations, which isn't anything to shy away from. But what are your impressions of Claw?
Yeah, I agree with you. On rate, the 9 for 5 is a good ratio. A lot of these 5-cost cards are giving between that like 7 and 10 markers, so he's towards the higher end of that. But more specifically, I think being able to put power into a location that you've otherwise completed, filling with 4 cards, gives a lot of value to kind of juke your opponent, right? Like they think this spot is kind of locked in at this current number, so they kind of go, okay, this is the metric I have to beat, and then Claw can pop up and let you go way over the top of what they thought they were competing with.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there are a couple cards like this where you can kind of you've filled up your location. Your opponent thinks, okay, this is the math. They've got all their strategy, and then you can kind of throw them off at the last second because maybe they've already locked up the location as well. Up next is a card that I think is another interesting counter to obviously the Nova Carnage ability or strategy, I should say, but also could throw off other strategies as well. So Leech is a 5-cost, 3-power card. The ability reads, on reveal, remove the abilities from all cards in your opponent's hand. I think this is very powerful.
Yeah, this definitely looks like a metagame card to me, where like if you're expecting most of your opponents to be doing something that this has play against, it's worth its slot. However, if other people are playing, they're just kind of good on rate cards with larger numbers, this card is going to have a much more middling effect. It's explicitly kind of bad against the American Chavez. So if that card is popular, people end up drawing that on turn 6. So then they'll still guarantee to have a good play on 6, even if you leech them on 5.
Yep, 100%. There is some counter back to this card as well, like you're saying. Okay, well, up next we have Magic. Magic is a 5-cost, 3-power card, so same stat line. Ability reads, on reveal, change this location to Limbo. And Limbo, correct me if I'm wrong, adds a 7th turn to the normally 6-turn game.
Yes, I love this card. It's so sweet. Just like fundamentally changing the rules of a game are always some of the sweetest cards to be playing with. And not only does this let you add an extra turn, but it neutralizes a current location on the board. So, if there's one that's kind of detrimental to cards that you've played out in a particular spot, you can use this to remove that detriment. And more specifically, if Magic is in your deck, you've probably built it in a way to leverage an extra turn of the game more efficiently than a lot of other decks would be able to.
100%. Now, I guess what would be your opinion? Would you think this is a better card most of the time to play on turn 5, or better to wait and throw it in turn 6? and really catch them off guard right at the end.
I think it depends on how far ahead or behind you are and how much further you think you can get with that extra turn. It also depends on what the texture of your hand looks like, right? So one of the big powers to adding a 7th turn to the game is that you get to play 2 6-cost cards out, and a lot of decks don't have 2 6-cost cards. So if you play this out on 5, you could be setting up your turns 6 and 7, so you get not 1 big play, but 2 before the game ends.
Yeah, which could have a huge impact. Up next here, we have Professor X. Professor X is a 5-cost, 3-power card. Seems to be the common trend of stat lines here. His ability reads ongoing, lock down this location. And in parentheses, cards can't be added, removed, or destroyed. So really, there are some cards in lower tiers that will maybe, block cards from being moved or from being destroyed. But this kind of really just locks down the location, right? That's the text here. Lock down this location. So really kind of locked in. Nothing can really change from that point on. So if you're winning and you're able to play Professor X down, you most likely have that location locked in for the win, unless, of course, some of the other cards we've already talked about, where you could add from a side location additional power.
Yep. And this honestly seems like a card that would be good with those on your side where, you could play this out on turn 5, lock down a location and be close. And then you could add like a claw as a follow-up or Mr. Fantastic or something to add a little bit more to put you ahead in a spot where your opponent's likely not going to be able to catch up.
Yeah. Yeah. So very interesting card, very good defensive card to limit your opponent's options. Well, up next is the highest power card, I believe, of the 5 drops. Red Skull is a 5-power, 5-cost, 14-power card, and his ability reads ongoing. Enemy cards at this location have +2 power. So doing the math there, if your opponent has maxed out cards here to have 4 cards at that location, you're getting 8. I have my thoughts about this. What are your thoughts about Red Skull?
Just correction, you're getting 6 because they'll be -8 total if they're full. But I think there's so many locations where having one large unit is beneficial. There's the Space Throne. There's all the various locations that give minus power to everything at them, where this card can just kind of come down and dominate that type of spot all on its own. That's even before you get into synergies like playing, say, your own Enchantress on turn 6 as a follow-up to just get rid of Red Skull's typical drawback.
Yeah, definitely can fake out your opponent, them thinking, okay, well, they've just buffed me, I've won this spot, and then they don't play to it the last turn, and you jump ahead by, minusing off that extra buff from them with the last second. Yeah, I think that sounds like a really fun strategy. I've noticed this on all the episodes we've been recording and releasing. As we just talk about the things, I'm just like, man, I just want to see a clip of somebody doing that right now. I want to see these things play out as soon as possible. So, up next, we have Rescue. Rescue, she is a 5-cost, 5-power card. Her ability reads, on reveal, if you play a card here next turn, +5 power. So we've seen similar cards to this. Obviously, this one's more in your favor of having control. And we talked about Jessica Jones, which is slightly similar, but kind of the opposite. What are your thoughts here, kind of this versus some of the other cards we've talked about?
This one's interesting, right? Because I like your comparison to Jessica Jones, but the rate, if you don't meet the condition on this one, is much lower, right? Instead of just being an 8 instead of 10, you're a 5 instead of 10. So this card makes you kind of make a pretty big commitment to a location if you really want to get the payoff for it.
Yeah. I don't think this one will see as much play as other cards that have similar effects, just because, turn 5, some of your locations are already going to be pretty filled up, and it's really going to let your opponent know, okay, why would they give up 5 power? Because it's so much. And it kind of gives your opponent knowledge and confidence that you're going to play into this more than like with Jessica Jones. So we'll see. We'll see if people tie this into a strategy later on. Up next, we have Sarah. Sarah is a 5-cost, 5-power card. And the ability reads, ongoing, cards in your hand cost 1 less. Minimum of 1 cost, so you can't zero these out. I think this is very powerful, especially for cards where you're wanting to get multiple low-cost cards played in on turn 6.
Yeah, so the thing to figure out with this card is how are you most abusing this? So quick math says you could play 3 drops on turn 6. You could play a 6 and a 2. You could play 2 3s and 2 2s. So the question is, how often are you going to be in scenarios where you can have one of those combinations of costs in your hand and make it beneficial for you? This is another card that could be a good inclusion with Magic specifically, because Magic would give you multiple turns to leverage this effect. Like, you play this card out on 5, and then on turn 6, Magic costs 4. So you could play Magic plus a 3-drop and then get a second turn with this ongoing discounted effect in your hand on turn 7.
Oh man, yeah. I think that will be a fun thing to see play out, because yeah, it just really keeps your opponent guessing to the last second there. So yeah, an interesting card for sure. So we will see how that plays out and what the consistency of strategies like that really turns out to be. So, well, up next we have Taskmaster. Taskmaster is a 5-cost, 0-power card. The ability reads, on reveal, set this card's power equal to the power of the last card you played. I think this is, very, very good card, in my opinion. I think if you're playing any kind of deck where maybe you can be buffing a card in your hand or in your deck, etc., and then play it down, right? Maybe turn 4, you get a really heavy card played down, and then being able to play this and just kind of duplicate that power a second time at 5 costs, I think is very unique.
Yeah, and you can even do less finagling than that. You just make this your turn 6 play after you play out a Red Skull, and then suddenly you had a 5-cost, 14-power thing, which is way above rate than what we typically have in the game currently.
Yeah, with really no downside, because you don't pull the ability over from the card. So
yep,
you're just going for the pure stats here. So even with Red Skull's downside, quote unquote, kind of being able to get 28 power on your side of the board is nothing to laugh at. So okay, up here next we have Vision. Vision is a 5-cost, 7-power card. His ability reads, you can move this each turn. There's lots of cards in the lower cost levels that play kind of into this move archetype. I don't think I've seen people start to piece together move decks. Nobody seems to have all the pieces yet, right? But I definitely think this will have some potential into that move archetype. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the big question will be with Vision is we talked about I'm blanking on her name, the 5-cost that moves herself to a spot if she can win the game for you earlier.
Captain Marvel.
Yes, that's the one. I think how much better is the 1 point of power on this going to be compared to Captain Marvel automatically moving herself if it wins versus you needing to predict on the last turn, hey, Vision going here wins me the game. I think these two cards kind of occupy a similar space, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of them ends up being just better than the other in most situations.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think it'll we have cards that can kind of help move other cards around. But obviously, if there's consistent cards where if you move to a location, right, the card gets buffed, meaning a card is giving that buff to another card like Vision, I think that'd be interesting to be able to buff Vision, kind of there also while moving. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I would weigh, I guess, on the side based on what you're saying, as Captain Marvel probably being better than Vision.
That's what my gut says too.
Yeah, but like you say, we'll kind of see how this plays out, and I'm guessing as of right now, Vision will probably fall more on the wayside. So up next is White Tiger. White Tiger is a 5-cost, 1-power card, so definitely one of the lower ones we've seen. But her ability reads, on reveal, add a 7-power tiger to another location. So I've seen this played a lot. Obviously, if there's a location that doubles the on reveal effects, there's that. But with like Odin, which is a card you obviously get early on in the game, being able to kind of add 2 7-power tigers to the board for the cost of this 5-drop is a pretty good stat line. Like we've talked about with Red Skull and others, kind of getting that 14 stat line. Obviously, if you can get it, it depends on you pulling the right cards and playing them. But I'd say White Tiger is a decent card. Her herself only being kind of a 1-power, so looking at that 5-8 overall, and that spread across 2 locations. Yep. But really, kind of 1-power isn't so great, kind of on one location and almost all the power being on the other location.
Well, not only is it 8 power across 2 locations, but 2 bodies is relevant in a lot of spots too, right? There's various cards like Captain America or Ant-Man that reward you for filling a location up, and White Tiger helps you do that in multiple spots. In addition to the location that gives you double on reveal effects, there's also the location we mentioned earlier that gives cards with no abilities +3 attack, and the Tiger notably does not have any abilities. There's actually 2 in the pool currently that this card has strong synergy with.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So I think an interesting card for sure. And yeah, I still think she's seeing a lot of play as of right now, but time will tell if she will last. So, well, that is all of the 5 cost cards. Definitely one of the smaller pools. I believe from what I've seen, the 2 and the 3 pools are the largest, and then the 4 and the 5 are the smallest. And then 1 and 6 kind of in the middle. So that's kind of the distribution as of right now. But before we close off here, Jeff, I just want to give you a minute to. We've talked about a lot of cards here, the strategies they could play into, etc. What we know now, what we could know in the future. But tell the listeners what's your favorite card, and that could be because of strategy, could be because of the art, you like the character in Marvel Universe, etc. What would you say out of all the 5 cost cards is your favorite and why?
I think definitely Magic, because she kind of fundamentally changes the way the game is played more than any of the other cards here. And being able to change the rules of the game and then build your deck to take advantage of that rules change better than anyone else is just super powerful. And to highlight for those that don't recall, Magic's the 5 cost 3 power card that changes her on reveal location to Limbo, giving you a 7th turn of the game.
Yeah, I think that is a great point. I mean, such a unique strategy to build around, right? Because every other deck in the game is essentially you're building to 6 turns, right? Obviously, Limbo, shows up randomly, and so then you adapt. But Magic gives you the opportunity to try to build what is the best 7-turn deck, which is very unique. So, yeah, I think Magic will be a very interesting card to see in play here. So, well, Jeff, really appreciate you being on the show here. Really appreciate you kind of giving your insights to these cards. I would be remiss if I didn't, give you the chance and ask you to just tell the listeners, where can they find you online? What's the best way to follow and consume your content that you are putting out about this game and several other games?
Yeah, for people that aren't familiar with me, I've been doing content full-time for the better part of 4 years. I've been playing card games, Magic the Gathering, and others for, a couple of decades now, playing in lots of tournaments and stuff like that. And you can just find me everywhere, just at Jeff Hoogland, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. I also have a completely Marvel Snap dedicated YouTube channel, youtube.com/Hooglandia Snap, where I've been putting up deck highlights and theory crafting breakdowns and other things like my talk about the economy that you mentioned earlier. And that channel will be all Snap all the time.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, listeners, make sure to go to subscribe, follow Jeff. He's putting out tons of great content you're not going to want to miss as you follow the game and you want to understand the meta and understand kind of the future news around the game. So, Jeff, just want to say one last time, thank you for being on the show. We hope you can be on here again at some point in the future to talk about other things later on. But thank you for being here, and we hope you have a good rest of your night.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Can't Stop Snapping is a podcast written, produced, recorded, and hosted by Michael Thurman. Thanks for listening.